The transport ship descended through the purple clouds of Valesia Prime, and Taeyang Park pressed his forehead against the window. He had seen many alien worlds during his 8 years in the Special Protection Corps, but nothing prepared him for this. The entire planet seemed to glow with a soft light that came from within the crystal structures below. Towers stretched toward the sky like frozen waterfalls, and he could see beings moving through the streets, their bodies shimmering in shades of blue and violet. "First time seeing Valesians?" asked Captain Minho, sitting across from him. The older man had been Taeyang's commander before retiring to diplomatic security work. "First time this close to their homeworld," Taeyang replied. He touched the scar that ran from his left eye to his jaw, a habit when he was nervous. "They really want a human bodyguard?" Minho nodded. "Queen Yuri specifically requested someone from Earth. The princess needs protection, and after what happened on Keldara Station, everyone knows humans don't break easily." Taeyang remembered Keldara. He had been part of the security team when the Macron horde attacked. While other species evacuated or surrendered, the human contingent held the civilian shelter for 14 hours against impossible odds. Taeyang took 3 plasma burns and a broken spine, but he kept fighting. The doctors said he should have died. Instead, he woke up in a medical pod 3 weeks later, ready to return to duty. The ship landed on a platform near the tallest structure in the city. The royal spire rose into the clouds, its surface reflecting light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Taeyang stepped onto the platform and immediately felt the difference in gravity. Lighter than Earth, which would give him an advantage if he needed to move quickly. 2 Valesian guards met them at the entrance. They were tall and thin, with skin that looked like polished gemstone. Their movements were graceful in a way that seemed almost liquid. One of them spoke in perfect English, though their voice had a musical quality that human vocal cords could never match. "Taeyang Park, Queen Yuri awaits you in the observation chamber." They walked through corridors that seemed to sing with light. Other Valesians passed them, and Taeyang noticed how they stared at him. He was used to it. Humans were still rare in the inner territories of the Andromeda Coalition. Most species found them fascinating and slightly frightening. Too aggressive, too stubborn, too willing to die for causes that logic said were already lost. The observation chamber was a vast room with walls that showed the stars beyond. Queen Yuri stood at the center, and even though Taeyang had seen her image in briefing files, nothing prepared him for her presence in person. She was ancient by human standards, over 300 years old, but she looked ageless. Her crystalline skin shifted between shades of silver and blue, and her eyes were like looking into deep water where unknown things moved in the darkness. Beside her stood a younger Valesian who could only be Princess Hana. She had her mother's coloring, but with threads of gold running through her crystalline form. Her eyes were curious rather than cold, and she smiled when she saw Taeyang. "You're smaller than I expected," Hana said. The reports made humans sound like giants. Taeyang was 6 feet tall and built like someone who had spent years in combat training. Compared to Valesians, who averaged 7 feet in height, he probably did look small, but he had learned long ago that size mattered less than will. "Most of our strength is on the inside, Princess," he replied. Queen Yuri studied him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. He had the strange feeling that she was looking past his body and examining something deeper. "You died on Keldara Station," she said. It was not a question. "For 43 seconds, according to the medical report," Taeyang confirmed. "My heart stopped after a plasma charge hit my chest." The medic got it beating again. "And you returned to active duty immediately after recovery." "I had a job to finish." Yuri tilted her head in a gesture that might have been approval or confusion. "My daughter requires protection. The Macron horde grows bolder, and there have been threats against the royal family. I need someone who will not abandon their post when death approaches." "I won't run," Taeyang said simply. "Because you cannot?" Hana asked. "Or because you will not?" Taeyang thought about his younger sister, Minji. She had been 16 when the raiders hit their colony. He had been off-world, training with the Corps. By the time he got the message, she was already dead. He remembered standing over her grave and making a promise. Never again. He would never let someone die when he could have prevented it. "Because I won't," he answered. The Queen seemed satisfied. She gestured, and a holographic display appeared showing the palace layout and security protocols. Taeyang listened as she explained his duties. He would shadow Princess Hana at all times except when she was in private quarters. He would attend all diplomatic functions, all public appearances, all travel. He would be her shield. There is one thing you must understand about Velesians, Yuri said, and for the first time her cold demeanor cracked slightly. We are psychically sensitive. We feel emotions from those around us. Your kind radiates intensity that we find both fascinating and overwhelming. Will that be a problem? Taeyang asked. That remains to be seen, the Queen replied. The first week passed quietly. Taeyang followed Hana through her daily routine, learning the palace and identifying potential security weaknesses. She was kind to him, asking questions about Earth and human culture. She wanted to know why humans fought so fiercely, why they would sacrifice themselves for others. It's who we are, Taeyang explained one evening as they walked through the palace gardens. The plants here glowed softly in the darkness. We're not the strongest species or the smartest, but we don't give up, ever, even when giving up would be logical, especially then. Hana touched one of the glowing flowers and it pulsed brighter at her presence. We Velesians value logic and reason above all else. Your species confuses us. You make decisions based on emotion and instinct. Does that bother you? She considered this. No, I think it makes you beautiful in a way we've forgotten how to be. The attack came during the diplomatic gala 3 weeks after Taeyang's arrival. Representatives from a dozen species gathered in the grand hall to celebrate a trade agreement. Taeyang stood against the wall watching the crowd while Hana spoke with ambassadors. He had learned to trust his instincts and something felt wrong. The servers moved through the crowd with trays of refreshments. Taeyang noticed one of them moving with purpose toward Princess Hana. The movements were too focused, too direct. His hand went to the plasma pistol on his hip. "Hana, down!" he shouted. The server dropped the tray and pulled a blade from beneath their uniform. It was a Macron infiltrator, their features hidden behind a hollow disguise. The blade swung toward where Hana's throat had been a moment before, but Taeyang was already moving. He crossed the distance in 3 strides and caught the blade with his left forearm. The weapon was molecular sharp, designed to cut through Velesian crystal skin like paper. It bit deep into Taeyang's flesh, scraping against bone. The pain was immense, but he had been trained to function through worse. His right fist drove into the infiltrator's throat, crushing their windpipe. They stumbled back and Taeyang followed, ignoring the blood pouring from his arm. 2 more infiltrators revealed themselves in the crowd, pulling weapons. Palace guards were moving, but they were too far away. Taeyang drew his pistol and fired twice. Both infiltrators dropped. The third tried to run, but Taeyang tackled them from behind, driving them into the floor. His vision was starting to blur from blood loss, but he held on until the guards arrived. Medical teams rushed forward. Taeyang looked down at his arm and saw white bone through the deep cut. The doctors pressed emergency sealant against the wound, while others checked Princess Hana for injuries. She was unharmed but shaking, her crystalline skin flickering with distress. Queen Yuri appeared at his side. She looked at his wound, then at his face. "You took a blade meant for my daughter." "That's the job," Taeyang said. His voice sounded distant to his own ears. The Queen placed her hand near his injured arm, not quite touching. He felt something strange, like cool water flowing through his mind. The pain lessened slightly. "You are either very brave or very foolish," she said softly. "Both, probably," he managed to reply before the medical sedatives took effect. He woke up in the medical wing with his arm in a regeneration sleeve. Princess Hana sat beside his bed, and when she saw him open his eyes, tears formed in hers. "You could have died," she whispered. "But you didn't," Taeyang replied. "That's what matters." Queen Yuri entered the room, and her expression was unreadable. She studied him for a long moment before speaking. "You have earned the gratitude of the royal family, Taeyang Park. You will be rewarded." "I don't need a reward. I just need to do my job." The Queen's lips curved in something that might have been a smile. "Then you shall continue to do it. But know this, human. You have been noticed." Taeyang did not fully understand what she meant, but he felt the weight of those words. Something had changed in that moment when he took the blade. He had crossed a line, and there was no going back. Outside the medical wing, the stars of Valesia Prime glittered in the darkness. And somewhere in that darkness, the Macron horde was planning their next move. The war was coming, and the War Council chamber was filled with tension thick enough to cut. Taeyang stood behind Princess Hana's chair, his eyes constantly scanning the room. 2 months had passed since the assassination attempt, And the situation with the Macron horde had grown worse with each passing day. They had destroyed 3 Valesian mining colonies and were demanding full surrender of the outer territories. Queen Yuri sat at the head of the crystalline table, her face showing no emotion as military advisors argued about response strategies. Lord Deho, a senior noble with skin that gleamed like polished obsidian, was advocating for immediate military action. "We cannot show weakness," Deho insisted. "The Macrons interpret negotiation as surrender. And how many thousands will die in a war we might avoid?" countered Admiral Borum, the fleet commander. "Our ships are powerful, but the Macron horde has numbers we cannot match." Queen Yuri raised her hand and the room fell silent. "The Macrons have agreed to a peace summit on Epsilon Crossing Station. I will attend." The announcement sent shockwaves through the council. Deho stood abruptly. "Your Majesty, that is exactly what they want. It could be a trap. Everything could be a trap, Lord Deho. That is why we take precautions." Yuri's eyes moved to her daughter. "Hana will remain here safely in the palace." "No." Princess Hana's voice was quiet but firm. "I am the heir to the throne. If you face danger, I should be at your side. The people need to see that their royal family does not hide in times of crisis." Taeyang wanted to speak but knew it was not his place. He was a bodyguard, not a political advisor, but every instinct he had screamed that this was wrong. Epsilon Crossing was a neutral station at the edge of contested space, far from any fleet support. If the Macrons wanted to strike at the heart of Valesia, this would be the perfect opportunity. Queen Yuri studied her daughter for a long moment. "Very well. But Taeyang stays with you at all times. If there is any threat, you evacuate immediately. That is not a request." "I understand, Mother." After the council dismissed, Taeyang followed Hana back to her chambers. She was quiet, which was unusual. Normally she asked him questions about Earth or told him about Valesian history. Today she simply walked with her shoulders tight and her crystalline skin flickering with suppressed emotion. "You think this is a mistake?" she said when they reached her rooms. "I think the Macrons don't negotiate in good faith." Taeyang replied carefully. "Then why let me go?" "Because you're right about one thing. Leaders who hide lose the respect of their people. But that doesn't mean I have to like it." Hana turned to face him and her expression was sad. "Taeyang, have you ever thought about what happens after? When the war ends?" "I try not to think that far ahead. Why not?" He touched the scar on his face again. "Because people like me don't usually have a long after. We have now and we do our jobs. And we hope that's enough. That is the saddest thing I have ever heard. Maybe. But it's honest." The journey to Epsilon Crossing took 3 days aboard the royal cruiser. Taeyang used the time to study the station's layout and develop evacuation protocols. The station was old, built centuries ago as a trading post between rival empires. It had changed hands a dozen times and bore the scars of multiple conflicts. Not exactly a place that inspired confidence. During the second day, Hana found him in the observation deck, reviewing security footage of the station's docking bays. "You barely sleep," she observed, sitting beside him. "I sleep enough. 4 hours a night is not enough for anyone. It's enough for me." He paused the footage and looked at her. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why do you care?" "About me, I mean. I'm just a bodyguard." Hana was quiet for a moment and the stars beyond the window painted her crystalline skin with silver light. "Because you remind me that there is more to existence than duty and logic. You feel everything so intensely. Fear, anger, loyalty, guilt. We Valesians have worked for thousands of years to control our emotions, to think clearly without them clouding judgment. But sometimes I wonder if we lost something important in that process. Emotions get people killed. They also keep people alive. You took that blade from me because you felt it was right, not because logic dictated it. A purely logical being would have calculated the cost and might have chosen differently." Taeyang had no response to that. She was probably right. But he had stopped trying to understand his own motivations years ago. He just did what needed to be done. On the 3rd day, they arrived at Epsilon Crossing. The station loomed ahead like a massive ring of metal and composite materials, slowly rotating to generate artificial gravity. Dozens of ships were docked at its ports representing various species from across the coalition. It should have been reassuring to see so many allies present. Instead, Taeyang felt his instincts screaming warnings. "Too many ships," he muttered. "What?" Hana asked. "There are too many ships docked here. Half of them have no business being at a peace summit. Queen Yuri, who had been reviewing diplomatic notes nearby, looked up. You suspect infiltration? I suspect something. Give me 2 hours to sweep our route from the docking bay to the conference center. Don't disembark until I clear it. Yuri nodded. Do what you must. Taiyang took a security team of 6 Veletian guards and entered the station. The corridors were crowded with beings from 100 different worlds. Merchants, traders, diplomats, travelers. All of them could be exactly what they appeared to be, or any one of them could be an assassin. He checked every doorway, every vent, every shadow. The conference center was in the station's diplomatic quarter, a section designed for high-level negotiations. Taeyang walked the entire route 3 times, his team scanning for explosives, weapons, or anything out of place. They found nothing, which somehow made him more nervous. It's too clean, he told the team leader, a Veletian named Quan. Someone went through here before us and made sure we wouldn't find anything. Perhaps you are being overly cautious, Quan suggested. Better paranoid than dead. He reluctantly cleared the route and returned to the royal cruiser. Queen Yuri and Princess Hana disembarked with a full honor guard. Taeyang stayed within arm's reach of Hana as they walked through the station. Crowds gathered to watch the Velesian queen pass, and security was overwhelmed trying to keep them at a safe distance. The conference center was massive, with a central chamber surrounded by private meeting rooms. Delegates from the coalition were already assembled, along with representatives from neutral parties. The Macron delegation had not yet arrived. They waited for 2 hours. Taiyang stood behind Hana's chair, his eyes never stopping their scan of the room. Something was wrong. He could feel it in his bones. Then the lights went out. Emergency power should have kicked in immediately, but there was only darkness. Taeyang grabbed Hana's arm and pulled her down behind the table. Stay low, he ordered. Explosions ripped through the station. Not near them, but close enough that the floor shook. Screams filled the darkness, and then the emergency lights flickered on, casting everything in a dim red glow. The conference center's main doors exploded inward. Macron shock troopers poured through, their heavy armor making them look like walking tanks. They were 8 feet tall, covered in black composite plating and carrying weapons that could cut through starship hulls. Taeyang drew his plasma pistol and fired at the first trooper through the door. The shot hit its helmet and scorched the armor but did not penetrate. The trooper turned toward him and raised its weapon. Run! Taeyang shouted at Hana. He threw himself at the trooper, tackling it despite the massive size difference. They crashed to the floor, and Taeyang jammed his pistol into the gap between the helmet and chest plate, firing repeatedly until the trooper stopped moving. Around him, chaos erupted. Velesian guards engaged the Macron forces, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Delegates were fleeing in all directions, and more explosions shook the station. This was not just an attack on the summit. This was an invasion. Taeyang grabbed a fallen trooper's rifle, a massive weapon designed for beings twice his size. He lifted it anyway and fired into the oncoming Macrons. The recoil nearly dislocated his shoulder, but he kept firing. Hana! He shouted over the noise. Where are you? Here. Her voice came from behind an overturned table. He fought his way toward her, using the rifle like a club when it ran out of ammunition. A Macron blade cut across his back, and he felt his blood run hot down his spine. He spun and drove his combat knife into the trooper's throat joint, finding the weak point in the armor. Queen Yuri was surrounded by her personal guard, her hands glowing with psychic energy as she defended herself. But even she could not hold against this many enemies. Taeyang reached Hana and pulled her toward the emergency exit. We need to get to the evacuation pods, he said. They ran through corridors filled with smoke and screaming. Macron forces were everywhere, executing anyone they found. This was not about conquest. This was about sending a message. A group of 3 troopers blocked their path. Taeyang pushed Hana behind him and raised the combat knife. Stay behind me, he said calmly. The troopers advanced, and Taeyang moved to meet them. He was smaller, weaker, and armed with nothing but a knife. By every logical calculation, he should surrender or run. But Taeyang Park was human, and humans did not know how to quit. He fought with everything he had, using speed and precision against their size and strength. He took hits that would have killed most speedy evacuation pods spun through space, its navigation systems damaged by debris from the dying station. Inside, Princess Hana cradled Taeyang's broken body and sobbed. His eyes were open but unseeing, staring at nothing. The medical scanner built into the pod wall showed a flat line where his heartbeat should have been. Brain activity had ceased 4 minutes ago. He was dead. Hana had watched people die before. It was an inevitable part of existence, something all beings eventually faced. But she had never held someone as they left. Never felt the exact moment when life became absence. Her crystalline skin flickered wildly with grief, colors shifting through the entire spectrum as her emotions overwhelmed her careful control. "Why did you do it?" she whispered to his body. "Why did you stay?" But she knew the answer, because that was what humans did. They made impossible choices and paid terrible prices, and they did it without hesitation when someone needed protecting. Taeyang had died the way he lived, standing between danger and those he had sworn to guard. The pod's communication system crackled to life. "This is Royal Cruiser Defender. We have you on scanners, Princess. Hold position for retrieval." Hana could not speak. She held Taeyang tighter, as if her touch could somehow call him back from wherever his spirit had gone. The pod was taken aboard the cruiser, and medical teams rushed forward. They stopped when they saw Taeyang's body, their instruments confirming what their eyes already knew. One of the doctors, a Valesian named Jisoo, gently touched Hana's shoulder. "Princess, we need to move him to the medical bay. There are procedures we must follow." "He saved me," Hana said, her voice breaking. "He gave everything to save me." They lifted Taeyang's body onto a medical stretcher and carried him away. Hana followed, ignoring the crew members who tried to guide her to her own quarters. She would not leave him. Not now. The medical bay was a stark white room filled with equipment designed to heal Valesian physiology. Human biology was similar enough that most of it would work, but what did it matter? The doctors could not heal death. Queen Yuri was waiting in the medical bay. She had escaped Epsilon Crossing with most of her guard, though many had died in the fighting. Her crystalline skin was dimmed with exhaustion, and there was a sadness in her ancient eyes that Hana had never seen before. "Mother," Hana began, but could not find more words. Yuri approached the medical table where Taeyang lay. She placed her hand above his chest, not quite touching. For a long moment she was silent. "He died for you," Yuri said finally. "Yes." "He chose to give his life rather than risk yours." "Yes." The queen closed her eyes. Such devotion is rare. Most beings flee when death approaches. They choose survival over sacrifice, but this human stood firm. "That is what makes them terrifying and beautiful," Hana whispered. "They refuse to bend." Yuri opened her eyes and looked at her daughter. "There is something I can do. Something that has not been done in over 1,000 years. But it will cost me greatly, and there is no guarantee it will work." Hana felt hope flicker in her chest, dangerous and desperate. "What do you mean?" "The binding of spirits. It is an ancient practice from before we became a starfaring people. When a soul departs, there is a brief window when a powerful psychic can reach across the veil and anchor it, preventing it from fading into the void. But it creates a permanent connection between the binder and the bound. Their lives become linked." "Then do it," Hana said immediately. "I will perform the binding." "No." Yuri's voice was firm. "You are too young, too untrained. The attempt would kill you, and his spirit would be lost anyway. If this is to be done, I must be the one to do it." "But mother, the connection. You would be bound to a human, to someone outside our species, outside our royal line. The council would never accept it. The council does not rule me. I rule them." Yuri placed both hands on Taeyang's chest. "This human gave his life for my daughter without hesitation. He stood against impossible odds because he believed it was right. If I do nothing, if I let such a spirit fade, then what does that say about me as a queen? You could die attempting this. Then I will die knowing I tried." Yuri looked at the medical staff. "Leave us." All of you, they hesitated, then obeyed. Even Dr. Jisoo, who had served the royal family for 2 centuries, left without argument. Some things were beyond medical science. When they were alone, Yuri began to glow. Her entire body lit with psychic energy, colors swirling across her skin like living auroras. She pressed her hands firmly against Taeyang's chest and closed her eyes. "I reach beyond the veil," she whispered in ancient Valesian. "I seek the spirit that has departed. I call to you, Taeyang Park of Earth, your task is not finished. Your oath is not fulfilled. Return." Hana watched as her mother's power grew, filling the room with light so bright it hurt to look at directly. The queen's body was shaking with effort, and Hana could feel the immense strain through their familial psychic link. "Come back," Yuri commanded. "I bind you to this world. I anchor your spirit with my own. Return to us." For a moment nothing happened. Then Taeyang's body jerked as if struck by lightning. The medical monitors erupted with activity. His heart began to beat, weak and irregular but definitely beating. His lungs drew breath. Brain activity spiked across the scanners. But Yuri was not finished. She pushed more of her life force into the binding, weaving connections between her spirit and his. Threads of psychic energy flowed from her into him, creating links that went deeper than any physical bond could reach. "I claim your spirit," Yuri said. "By my will, by my power, I call you back from death. We are bound now, you and I, until the stars go cold." Taeyang's eyes snapped open, but they were glowing with the same light that surrounded the queen. He gasped, his body arching on the table, and Hana could see the psychic threads connecting him to her mother like lines of living light. Then the glow faded. Yuri collapsed, catching herself against the medical table. Her skin had lost much of its luster, and she looked older than Hana had ever seen her. Taeyang lay gasping, his chest heaving as he struggled to breathe. The terrible wounds that covered his body began to heal, not from medical technology but from the life force that Yuri was pouring into him through their bond. "Mother," Hana rushed to support Yuri. "I am fine," Yuri said, though she clearly was not. "It is done. The binding is complete." Taeyang turned his head and looked at them. Confusion filled his eyes. "What happened?" "I was dead. I felt myself dying." "You did die," Yuri said. "I brought you back." "How?" "By binding my spirit to yours. We are connected now in a way that goes beyond words. I can feel your emotions and you can feel mine. Our lives are linked." Taeyang tried to sit up, but his body was too weak. "You shouldn't have done that. I'm just a bodyguard. My life is not worth such a sacrifice." "That is not for you to decide." Yuri's voice was sharp. "I make my own choices, human. I chose to save you because you earned it." Over the following days, Taeyang healed with impossible speed. The psychic bond between him and Queen Yuri fueled his recovery, drawing on her vast reserves of life force. But it went both ways. Yuri could feel his pain, his confusion, his guilt at having been saved. And he could feel her loneliness, the centuries of isolation she had endured as queen. They tried to keep the bond closed, to maintain mental privacy, but it was difficult. Strong emotions leaked through. When Taeyang felt anger at his own weakness, Yuri felt it like a flash of heat. When she experienced worry about the political fallout of her decision, he felt it like ice in his chest. The Royal Council was furious when they learned what Yuri had done. Lord Daeho led the opposition, standing before the throne and demanding an explanation. "You have bound yourself to an alien," Daeho said, his voice filled with disgust. "To a member of a species barely a century into space travel. This is unprecedented and unacceptable." "I have bound myself to a warrior who died protecting my daughter," Yuri replied coldly. "Show me another being in this empire who has demonstrated such devotion, and perhaps I will consider your objections valid." The political implications alone are staggering. What message does this send to the other species in the coalition? That humans are equal to Velesians? Perhaps that is exactly the message they need to hear. Taeyang stood behind Yuri's throne, uncomfortable with the attention. He could feel the queen's anger through their bond, a cold fury that she kept carefully controlled on the surface. But beneath her calm exterior, she was seething at the council's presumption. "I want this binding dissolved," Daeho demanded. "There must be a way." "There is no way," Yuri said. "Once bound, spirits cannot be separated without killing both parties. What is done is done. Then you have doomed yourself for a human who will die in a fraction of your lifespan. Better a few years of honor than an eternity of shame." Yuri stood from her throne. "This council is dismissed. We have more important matters to address. The Micron Horde has declared full war. Epsilon Crossing was not a random attack. It was a declaration of their intent to destroy us." The council filed out, many of them casting hostile glances at Taeyang. He stood still, meeting their stares without flinching. He had faced worse than political enemies. When they were alone, Hana approached her mother. "You are exhausted. The binding took more." 3 weeks after his resurrection, Taeyang stood in the training chamber trying to understand the new reality of his existence. The room was designed for psychic training, with walls that responded to mental energy. Queen Yuri stood across from him, patient but insistent. "Close your eyes," she instructed. "Feel the connection between us." Taeyang obeyed. When he focused, He could sense the golden thread linking his mind to hers. It pulsed with energy, and through it flowed emotions, thoughts, and something deeper that he could not name. "I feel it," he said. "Good. Now try to push a thought through the bond, something simple." He focused on the image of Earth, his homeworld, and pushed it toward her. For a moment, nothing happened. Then he felt her surprise bloom through the connection. "I see it," Yuri said, wonder in her voice. "Blue oceans and green continents? This is your world?" "Yes, it is beautiful. More colorful than I imagined." They practiced for hours. Yuri taught him how to shield his thoughts, creating mental barriers so that their every emotion was not constantly shared. But the barriers were imperfect. Strong feelings leaked through no matter how hard they tried to block them. During one session, Taeyang thought about his sister Minji, and the grief hit him like a physical blow. The memory of finding her body, of failing to save her. Through the bond, Yuri felt his pain, and she gasped. "I am sorry," she said softly. "I did not mean to intrude on that memory. It's not your fault." The bond works both ways. Taeyang opened his eyes. "You lost someone too." "Your mate." Yuri's expression became distant. "His name was Taemin. He died 200 years ago fighting the Krell invasion. I held him as he passed, much like Hana held you. Do you still miss him?" "Every day." "Time does not heal all wounds. It simply teaches you to carry them." They stood in silence, two beings separated by species and culture but connected by shared loss. Taeyang realized that despite her power and immortality, Queen Yuri was as alone as he was. The political situation in the palace grew worse. Lord Daeho gathered supporters who opposed the binding, claiming that Yuri had diminished the throne by connecting herself to a human. Whispers filled the corridors, and Taeyang could feel the hostility whenever he walked through the palace. Princess Hana remained his strongest defender. She made it clear to anyone who would listen that Taeyang had saved her life, and that her mother's decision was both honorable and necessary. But even she could not silence all the critics. One evening, Daeho confronted Taeyang directly in the palace gardens. The noble's crystalline skin gleamed like black glass in the fading light. "You do not belong here, human," Daeho said. "You are a curiosity, nothing more. Once the queen tires of you, you will be discarded." Taeyang met his gaze calmly. "I did not ask for this. I was doing my job. Your job is to serve, not to become equal to royalty. I have never claimed to be equal to anyone. I am exactly what I have always been. A soldier." Daeho stepped closer, his voice dropping. "The queen is making mistakes because of you. She should be focused on the war, not wasting energy keeping a human alive. Every moment she spends maintaining your bond is energy she cannot use to defend our empire." Before Taeyang could respond, he felt a surge of anger through the bond. Not his anger, hers. Queen Yuri appeared from the shadows of the garden, her presence commanding. "You presume much, Lord Daeho," she said, her voice like ice. Daeho bowed quickly. "Your Majesty, I was simply expressing concern for your well-being. You were attempting to intimidate someone under my protection. That is not concern. That is insubordination." Yuri moved to stand beside Taeyang. "I will make this clear one final time. Taeyang Park is bound to me by the oldest law of our people. To insult him is to insult me. To threaten him is to threaten me. Is that understood?" "Yes, Your Majesty," Daeho said through gritted teeth. "Good. You are dismissed." After Daeho left, Yuri turned to Taeyang. Through the bond, he could still feel her anger, but also something else. Protectiveness. She had defended him the way he had defended Hana. "You did not need to do that," Taeyang said. "Yes, I did. They must understand that you are not alone. You have my power behind you now. That only makes them hate me more. Let them hate. What matters is that they respect the bond even if they despise it." She paused. "How are you adjusting to all of this?" "Honestly? I don't know. I died, I came back. Now I'm connected to a queen who can feel everything I feel. It's not exactly covered in the bodyguard training manual." Yuri smiled, a rare expression that made her look younger. "No, I imagine it is not." The war with the Macron horde intensified. They launched attacks on multiple Valesian colonies, and the coalition fleet was spread thin trying to defend them all. In the War Council, Admiral Borum presented increasingly dire reports. "We are losing ground," Borum said. "The Macrons have superior numbers, and they are willing to sacrifice their forces in ways we cannot match." "What do you suggest?" Yuri asked. "We need a new strategy. something unpredictable that they cannot counter with sheer numbers. Taeyang spoke up, surprising everyone in the room. Use humans. The council turned to look at him. Lord Deho scoffed. Humans? What can a handful of primitives do against the Horde? We fight differently than Velesians, Taeyang explained. You rely on logic, careful planning, minimal casualties. That is good strategy against a rational enemy. But the Macrons are not rational. They only understand one thing: relentless violence. And you think humans can provide that? Admiral Borum asked, genuinely curious. I know we can. We have been fighting impossible battles since before we left our homeworld. We have a saying: the only way out is through. Give me command of human forces in the coalition and I will show you what we can do. The council erupted in argument. Half thought it was insane. The other half thought it was merely foolish. But Queen Yuri raised her hand for silence. Tell me your plan, Taeyang. He outlined his strategy. Small teams of human soldiers embedded with Velesian forces, using tactics that other species considered too dangerous or reckless. Boarding actions against Macron ships, close quarters combat instead of standoff weapons, fighting through injuries that would incapacitate other species, making the Macrons afraid. You are describing suicide missions, Lord Deho said. I am describing what humans do naturally, Taeyang corrected. We survive things that should kill us. We fight on when others quit. That is our advantage. Yuri studied him through their bond, feeling his absolute conviction. You truly believe this will work? I know it will. Give me a chance to prove it. After the council, Yuri asked him to walk with her through the palace. They moved through corridors lit by bioluminescent panels, passing guards who bowed as the queen passed. What you are proposing is dangerous, Yuri said quietly. War is dangerous. I could lose you again. Taeyang stopped walking. Through the bond he felt her fear, raw and honest. She had saved him from death, bound herself to him, and now he was asking to throw himself back into danger. You could, he admitted. But if I stay here, safe in the palace, I am not living. I am just waiting. That is not who I am. I know. She placed her hand against his chest over his heart. Through the bond she could feel it beating, strong and steady. When I brought you back, I thought I was saving you. But perhaps I was also trying to save myself. To have someone who understood loss and duty the way I do. You gave me a second chance. Let me use it to make a difference. Yuri closed her eyes and he felt her struggle through their connection. Finally, she nodded. Very well. I will give you command of the Coalition's human forces. But I have one condition. What? I am making you my champion. It is an ancient title, one that has not been used for 300 years. It grants you authority to act in my name, to lead troops and make strategic decisions without waiting for council approval. That will make the council furious. The council is already furious. Let them rage. You have proven your worth, Taeyang Park. Not just to me, but to the entire empire when you died for my daughter. It is time the galaxy understood that humans are not curiosities or primitives. You are warriors of the highest order. 3 days later, Yuri made the announcement during a formal court session. The assembled nobles watched in shock as she declared Taeyang her champion, placing upon his shoulders a cloak woven with silver thread that caught the light like starfire. From this day forward, Yuri proclaimed, Taeyang Park of Earth speaks with my voice and acts with my authority. He is bound to me by law older than this empire. To defy him is to defy me. Lord Deho stood, his face twisted with anger. Your Majesty, this is madness. You elevate a human above your own people. I elevate someone who has earned it through sacrifice and valor. Can you say the same, Lord Deho? When was the last time you risked your life for anyone but yourself? Deho had no answer. He sat down, defeated but not broken. Taeyang knew he had made a permanent enemy. But standing there with Yuri beside him, feeling her support through their bond, he found he did not care. After the ceremony, Princess Hana embraced him. Mother chose well, she whispered. Make us proud. I will try. That night, Taeyang stood on a balcony overlooking the city of Valesia Prime. The crystalline towers glowed in the darkness, and above them, the stars stretched into infinity. Queen Yuri joined him and they stood in comfortable silence. Are you afraid? She asked, always. Fear keeps you alive. I meant afraid of what comes next, of wearing that cloak and carrying the way. The transport ship carried 120 human soldiers toward the front lines. They came from Earth, from Mars colonies, from stations scattered across human space. All volunteers. All veterans. all ready to show the galaxy what humanity could do when given the chance. Taeyang stood before them in the cargo hold, wearing the silver cloak of the Queen's champion. He had spent the past month gathering these soldiers, selecting them carefully. Not the biggest or the strongest, but the ones who had survived impossible situations. The ones who knew how to keep fighting when logic said to quit. Most of you know who I am, Taeyang began. For those who don't, my name is Taeyang Park. I died once and came back. Queen Yuri of Valesia made me her champion and gave us a mission. She wants us to teach the Macron Horde what it means to fight humans. Some of the soldiers grinned. Others simply nodded. They all understood what he was really saying. They were being asked to do the jobs that other species could not do, the bloody work, the desperate fights, the missions where survival was not guaranteed. We are calling ourselves Ghost Company, Taeyang continued, because that is what we will be to the Macrons, ghosts that appear from nowhere, hit hard, and disappear. They think they know how to fight. They think their size and numbers make them unstoppable. We are going to prove them wrong. A woman near the front raised her hand. Her name was Sumi, a decorated combat engineer from the Mars Defense Force. What kind of operations are we talking about? The kind that Valesians and other coalition species consider suicide, Taeyang said honestly. Boarding actions against Macron ships, sabotage missions behind enemy lines, holding positions that should be impossible to hold. The Macrons win through overwhelming force. We win through being too stubborn to die. Sounds like fun, Sumi said with a grim smile. Their first mission came 3 days later. A Macron battlecruiser had taken position near a Valesian supply station, cutting off reinforcements to the front lines. The coalition fleet could not spare ships for a direct assault. But they did not need ships. They needed boarding teams. Taeyang briefed Ghost Company in the ready room. The cruiser has weak points where the armor plating connects to the engine section. We are going to use assault pods to breach there, fight our way to the engine core, and overload it. The explosion should take out the entire ship. How many Macrons on board? Asked Ji Huan, a former Special Forces operative. Estimated 300. Heavily armed and armored. And there are 40 of us going in. Correct. Ji Huan laughed without humor. Those poor Macrons have no idea what's about to hit them. The assault pods were small craft designed to punch through ship hulls at high speed. They were cramped, uncomfortable, and had a failure rate that made most species refuse to use them. Humans loaded in without complaint. Taeyang was in the lead pod with 9 other soldiers. As they accelerated toward the Macron cruiser, he felt Queen Yuri's presence through their bond. She was back on Valesia Prime, but the connection let her sense what he was feeling. Fear, anticipation, determination. Stay safe, her thought whispered through his mind. I will try, he sent back. The pod hit the cruiser's hull with bone-crushing force. Cutting lasers burned through the armor plating, and then they were through. The pod's front section exploded outward, and Ghost Company poured into the Macron ship. The interior was designed for beings 8 feet tall, which meant Taeyang and his team had to look up to see most of the corridors. Alarms were already screaming. The Macrons knew they had been boarded. Teams of 4, Taeyang ordered. Work your way to the engine section. Kill anything that moves. Go. Ghost Company split up and vanished into the ship's corridors. Taeyang led his team deeper into the cruiser, moving fast. They encountered the first group of Macron defenders at an intersection. 6 of them, armed with heavy plasma weapons. The Macrons opened fire and Taeyang's team scattered. The plasma bolts were powerful enough to punch through walls, but the Macrons were used to fighting at range, expecting their enemies to take cover and return fire in an organized fashion. Humans did not fight that way. Taeyang rushed forward while the Macrons were still tracking his team members. He slid under their line of fire and came up inside their formation, his combat knife finding the gaps in armor. 2 Macrons fell before they understood what was happening. Sumi threw a magnetic charge that stuck to another Macron's chest plate. The explosion killed it and damaged 2 more. Ji Huan finished them with precise shots to their helmet joints. Keep moving, Taeyang ordered. They fought through 6 more groups of defenders, taking casualties but never stopping. A human named Kyung took a plasma bolt to the leg but kept fighting, using a broken piece of bulkhead as a crutch. Another soldier named Inwu lost his left hand to a blade, but switched his weapon to his right and continued advancing. The Macrons were learning to fear them. Taeyang could see it in how they hesitated, how they retreated when Ghost Company approached. These humans should have been easy to kill, small, fragile, outnumbered, but they kept coming, bleeding and broken, refusing to stop. Taeyang's team reached the engine core first. The room was massive, filled with the throbbing power of the ship's main reactor. Macron engineers were trying to lock it down, but Sumi shot them before they could reach the controls. "Give me 5 minutes," Sumi said, already working on the reactor's containment field. "You have 3. Taeyang replied, checking the corridor behind them. Macron reinforcements were coming. Taeyang could hear their heavy footsteps echoing through the ship. He positioned his remaining team members at the corridor entrance and prepared to hold. The Macrons came in a wave, dozens of them trying to overwhelm the narrow entrance through sheer numbers. Taeyang fired until his weapon overheated, then drew his knife and held the line with nothing but blade and determination. A Macron blade cut across his ribs. He felt the bone crack, felt blood pour down his side. But he had felt worse. He had died before. This was just pain, and pain could be ignored. Through the bond, he felt Queen Yuri gasp as she experienced his injury. Her concern flooded through the connection along with something else. Pride. She was watching her champion fight, feeling every blow he took and every enemy he dropped, and she was proud. "Done," Sumi shouted. "We have 90 seconds to get off this ship." They ran. Behind them, the reactor began to scream as its containment field collapsed. The Macrons abandoned their pursuit, fleeing toward their own escape pods. Ghost Company made it back to their assault pods with 15 seconds to spare. The explosion was visible from the Valesian supply station. The Macron cruiser turned into a miniature sun, then collapsed into debris. Ghost Company had lost 8 soldiers, but 32 made it back. And they had destroyed a ship that would have taken a full coalition fleet days to crack. Word spread quickly. Humans had boarded a Macron cruiser with less than 50 soldiers and blown it apart from the inside. Other coalition species watched the recordings with disbelief. This was not how battles were supposed to work. Over the following months, Ghost Company launched 20 more operations. They captured a Macron supply depot by fighting through a defending force 5 times their size. They sabotaged a shipyard that was building invasion craft. They held a critical pass on the planet Keldara against 3 waves of Macron troops, refusing to retreat even when their ammunition ran out and they had to fight hand-to-hand. The Macron horde began to fear encountering humans. Their commanders issued warnings. If humans were detected, proceed with extreme caution. They fight like demons. They do not stop when wounded. They prefer close combat where their ferocity gives them advantage. But Ghost Company was just the beginning. Inspired by their success, other human units in the coalition adopted similar tactics. Humanity's reputation grew. They were the species that refused to surrender, that fought through injuries that would kill others, that turned impossible situations into victories through sheer bloody-minded determination. Taeyang commanded from the front, never asking his soldiers to take risks he would not take himself. He was shot, stabbed, burned, and broken repeatedly. Each time, the bond with Queen Yuri helped him heal faster than should have been possible. Her life force flowed into him when he was injured, knitting bone and flesh back together. But the bond went both ways. Each time he was hurt, she felt it. Each time he nearly died, she suffered with him. Taeyang tried to shield her from the worst of it. But strong emotions always leaked through their connection. One night after a particularly brutal operation, he woke in his quarters on the military station to find Queen Yuri's psychic projection standing beside his bed. She looked exhausted, her crystalline skin dim. "You almost died today," she said quietly. "I felt your heart stop for 3 seconds before it started again." "I am sorry," Taeyang said. "I try not to let you feel the worst of it. Do not apologize for fighting. But do not forget that your life is tied to mine now. If you die, part of me dies with you." He sat up, wincing at the pain in his healing ribs. "Would you rather I stayed safe? Commanded from behind instead of leading from the front?" "No, that would not be you." "I bound myself to a warrior, not a politician." She moved closer, and even though she was only a projection, he could feel her presence. "But I worry." The intelligence report arrived 3 days before the attack. Coalition scouts detected a massive Macron fleet assembling at the edge of Valesian space, not raiding forces or patrol groups. This was their entire battle fleet, hundreds of ships carrying enough firepower to reduce a planet to ash. Their destination was clear: Valesia Prime. The Macron horde had decided to end the war with a single devastating strike. Kill Queen Yuri, shatter the coalition leadership, and force surrender through terror. Taeyang stood in the War Council chamber, looking at the holographic display of the approaching fleet. The numbers were impossible. The coalition's main forces were scattered across a dozen systems defending colonies and supply lines. They could not pull back in time to defend the capital. "We have 72 hours," Admiral Boram said, her voice tight with stress. "Maybe less if they increase speed." "How many ships can we gather to defend Valesia Prime?" Queen Yuri asked. 20, perhaps 30, against their 300. Lord Daeho stood abruptly. "Then we must evacuate. Get the royal family off-world before the horde arrives." "And abandon the capital?" Yuri's voice was cold. "Leave millions of civilians to die? Better to preserve the leadership and rebuild than lose everything in a doomed battle." Taeyang felt rage burn through the psychic bond, and he knew it was Yuri's anger mixing with his own. They both knew what Daeho was really suggesting. Save the nobles and let the common people face the Macrons alone. "No," Yuri said firmly. "We do not abandon our people. If the Horde wants Valesia Prime, they will have to take it from us." "Your Majesty, this is suicide," Daeho protested. "Perhaps, but it is honorable suicide." She looked at Taeyang. "Champion, what do you recommend?" Taeyang studied the tactical display. The Royal Spire was the tallest structure on the planet and the most defensible location. If they could concentrate their forces there, they might hold long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Maybe. "We turn the spire into a fortress," he said. "Evacuate all non-essential personnel and civilians to the underground shelters. Bring Ghost Company and every human soldier we can gather to the capital. Set up defensive positions throughout the city. Make them fight for every building, every street, every room." "You are talking about urban warfare," Admiral Boram said. "The casualties will be catastrophic." "Yes, but it will buy time. And time is what we need." Taeyang looked at each council member. "The Macrons think they can win through overwhelming force. We proved them wrong by refusing to break. That is what humans do. That is what I am asking all of you to do now." Princess Hana, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "I will stay with the defense force. I will not evacuate while my people fight." "Hana, no," Yuri began. "Mother, you taught me that a leader's place is with their people. I am staying." Through the bond, Taeyang felt Yuri's conflict. Pride in her daughter's courage. Terror at the thought of losing her, but finally she nodded. "Very well, we stand together." The next 72 hours were a blur of preparation. Ghost Company returned to Valesia Prime, along with every available human soldier in the sector. In total, they gathered 800 humans. Against hundreds of thousands of Macron troops, it was a pittance. But Taeyang had learned that numbers mattered less than determination. They fortified the Royal Spire, turning it into a layered defense. The lower levels were rigged with explosives. The middle sections had overlapping fields of fire. The upper levels contained the command center and the royal chambers. If the Macrons wanted to reach Queen Yuri, they would have to climb through a mountain of human corpses to do it. The civilians were moved to deep shelters designed to survive orbital bombardment. Princess Hana personally oversaw the evacuation, refusing to leave until the last child was safely underground. Taeyang stayed at her side, simultaneously coordinating defense positions and keeping her protected. On the final night before the attack, Taeyang found Queen Yuri on the highest balcony of the spire, looking at the stars. The psychic bond between them had grown stronger over the months of fighting. They could sense each other's emotions without trying now, could share thoughts with barely any effort. "Tomorrow we might die," Yuri said quietly. "I have died before. It was not so bad." She smiled despite the situation. "You and your human humor in the face of death, I will never understand it. It is how we cope. If we took everything seriously, we would go mad." Yuri turned to face him. In the starlight, her crystalline skin glowed softly. "I want you to know something, Taeyang. These past months, fighting beside you, feeling your courage through our bond, have been the most alive I have felt in centuries. You gave me something I thought I had lost forever." "What is that?" "Hope. The belief that some things are worth dying for." Through the bond, he felt the depth of her emotion. It was not just gratitude or respect. It was something deeper, something that neither of them had expected when she bound their spirits together. They had become more than queen and champion. They had become two souls that understood each other completely. If we survive this, Taeyang said carefully, what happens then? I do not know, but I would like to find out. The Macron fleet arrived with the dawn. They dropped out of hyperspace in a formation that darkened the sky, blotting out the sun. 300 warships bristling with weapons, carrying an army that could overwhelm any defense. Their commander, a Macron warlord named Krugen, broadcast a message across all channels. His voice was a deep rumble that promised violence. Queen Yuri of Valesia, surrender yourself and your government, or we will reduce your planet to ruins. You have 1 hour to decide. Queen Yuri stood in the command center, surrounded by her advisors and military leaders. Through the windows, they could see the Macron fleet beginning to take up bombardment positions. She opened a channel and responded, Warlord Krugen, you may take this planet if you can, but you will pay for every meter in blood. We do not surrender. We do not retreat. Come and face us if you dare. Krugen's laugh echoed through the speakers. So be it. Your defiance will be remembered as the moment Valesia fell. The bombardment began. Plasma cannons fired from orbit, targeting military installations and infrastructure. The planetary shields held for the first wave, but everyone knew they could not last forever. The Macrons had enough firepower to crack the planet's crust if they wanted to. But they did not want to destroy Valesia Prime. They wanted to conquer it, to break the coalition's spirit by capturing their capital intact. So after an hour of bombardment, they began landing troops. Drop pods rained from the sky like a metal storm. Thousands of Macron soldiers landed in the city surrounding the royal spire. They were massive, armored, and equipped with weapons designed to kill from a distance. They had not expected what happened next. Ghost Company hit them while they were still organizing after landing. Small teams of humans appeared from nowhere, attacking with brutal efficiency. They used the city's architecture against the Macrons, fighting from inside buildings where the larger aliens could not maneuver effectively. They set ambushes in narrow streets. They turned every intersection into a killing ground. Taeyang led the defense from the Spire's command center, coordinating the various teams while simultaneously preparing for the assault he knew was coming. The Macrons were pushing forward despite their casualties, slowly surrounding the Spire. Princess Hana worked beside him, using her psychic abilities to coordinate with Valesian commanders across the city. Queen Yuri stood at the center of it, all her presence a beacon of strength that kept everyone fighting. The first Macron troops reached the Spire's base 3 hours into the battle. They found explosive traps that collapsed entire sections of the lower levels. They found automated defense turrets that forced them to advance under constant fire. And they found human soldiers who refused to retreat. Sumi held the eastern entrance with 20 soldiers against 300 Macrons. When they ran out of ammunition, they fought with blades and bare hands. When the position was finally overrun, only 3 humans were left alive, and they took 80 Macrons with them. Jiwan defended the main stairwell for 6 hours straight, falling back 1 level at a time, making the Macrons pay for every step. He died when a plasma grenade took out his cover, but not before he detonated the charges that collapsed the stairwell. Behind him, buying another hour for the defenders above. All across the Spire, humans fought with a ferocity that shocked even their Valesian allies. They did not fear death. They had made peace with it long before the battle started. All that mattered was making their deaths count. Taeyang felt each loss through the bond with Yuri. Each human who fell sent a ripple of grief through him, but he could not stop to mourn. The living needed him more than the dead. By nightfall, the Macrons had fought their way to the middle levels of the Spire. They had lost thousands of troops in the process, far more than they had anticipated. But they kept coming, driven by Warlord Krugen's rage at this unexpected resistance. Taeyang gathered the remaining Ghost Company soldiers in the throne room. There were only 43 left out of the 800 who had started the day. They were wounded, exhausted, covered in blood, both their own and their enemies, but their eyes were still hard, still ready. The Macrons are pushing for the royal chambers, Taeyang said. They know if they kill Queen Yuri, the war ends. We are all that stands between them and her. Then they will have to. Queen Yuri felt the moment Taeyang's heart stopped. It was like a piece of her own soul being torn away, leaving a wound that went deeper than flesh or bone. The psychic bond that connected them began to unravel, and she felt herself being pulled toward death alongside him. But this time she made a choice that had never been made before in all of Valesian history. Instead of fighting the pull, she surrendered to it. Instead of trying to anchor his spirit alone, she bound her own life force to his permanently and completely. From this moment forward, they would share one fate. If he died, she died. If she lived, he lived. The throne room exploded with psychic energy. Princess Hana gasped as she felt the power her mother was releasing. It was not just a binding of spirits anymore. It was a fusion, a permanent intertwining of two lives into something that had never existed before. Every Valesian on the planet felt it. The Queen's psychic presence blazed like a star, and in that light, they saw what she was doing. She was giving up her independence, her immortality, her very self to save a human who had given everything to protect them. The remaining Macron forces in the spire felt it too, and they hesitated. Something was happening that went beyond battle, beyond war. Ancient instincts told them to flee from this power. The energy surrounding Yuri and Taeyang grew brighter, hotter, until Princess Hana had to shield her eyes. Through the psychic network that connected all Valesians, they heard their queen's voice. "I will not accept this. I will not let death take what is mine. Taeyang, Park of Earth, I bind my life to yours. We rise together or we fall together. There is no other path." In the space between life and death, Taeyang's fading consciousness felt her presence. He tried to push her away, tried to tell her not to waste her immortal life on someone as temporary as him. But she would not listen. She wrapped her existence around his like armor, refusing to let the darkness claim either of them. "You came back for me once," her voice echoed in the void. "Now I am coming for you. Take my hand, Taeyang. We are not finished yet." He reached for her across the emptiness, and when their spirits touched, something impossible happened. His heart began to beat again. His lungs drew breath. His shattered body began to heal, not from medical technology but from the pure life force that Yuri was sharing with him. But the cost was visible. As Taeyang's eyes opened, as he gasped air into his burned lungs, Queen Yuri collapsed beside him. The effort of the binding had drained her to the edge of death. Her crystalline skin was pale, nearly translucent, and her breathing was shallow. "Mother." Princess Hana caught Yuri before she hit the floor. Taeyang struggled to sit up, his newly healed body still weak. Through the bond, he could feel what Yuri had done. She had not just anchored his spirit this time. She had woven their lives together so completely that they were essentially one being in two bodies. Her heartbeat matched his. Her breath synchronized with his. If one of them was injured, the other would feel it and help heal it. If one of them died, both would die. "Why?" he asked, his voice rough. "Why would you do this?" Yuri opened her eyes and looked at him. Despite her exhaustion, she smiled. "Because a life without you in it is not worth living. I have existed for 300 years, Taeyang. I have been queen, warrior, leader, but I have never truly lived until I met you. If I must give up my immortality to keep you with me, that is a price I gladly pay." Through the bond, he felt the truth of her words. She loved him, not just respected him or valued him as a soldier. She loved him with an intensity that matched his own feelings for her. Somewhere during the months of fighting and dying and surviving together, they had become essential to each other. "I love you too," he said, the words feeling inadequate but honest. Princess Hana was crying, but they were tears of joy mixed with sadness. Her mother had saved the human who saved her, but in doing so had fundamentally changed what it meant to be Queen of Valesia. Outside the throne room, the battle was ending. The coalition fleet had broken the Macron forces, and without Warlord Krugen to lead them, the invasion collapsed. The surviving Macrons retreated to their ships and fled into hyperspace, their grand plan to conquer Valesia Prime reduced to ashes. Ghost Company had been reduced to 19 survivors, 19 out of 800, but those 19 stood guard over their champion and their queen, refusing to rest until they were certain the danger had passed. Over the following days, the full extent of what Queen Yuri had done became clear. The psychic bond between her and Taeyang was permanent and unbreakable. They could share thoughts without effort, feel each other's emotions constantly, and their life forces were so intertwined that healing one meant healing both. But there were costs. Yuri's immortality was gone. By binding herself to a human, she had tied her lifespan to his. She would age as he aged, die when he died. For an ancient being who had expected to live for thousands more years, it was a sacrifice beyond measure. The Royal Council erupted in chaos when they understood what had happened. Lord Deho led the protests, demanding that Yuri find a way to undo the binding. "You have doomed the throne," Deho shouted during the emergency council session. "When you die, who will rule? You have no other heirs except Hana, and she is too young. Then she will grow," Yuri replied calmly. She sat on her throne with Taeyang standing beside her, and for the first time in her reign, she looked content. "I have secured peace with the Macron horde through strength. I have shown the galaxy that Valicia does not abandon those who fight for us. And I have ensured that when my time comes, my daughter will be ready to rule. You have ensured that our queen will die like a common mortal," Deho spat. Yuri stood, and despite her diminished power, her presence still commanded the room. "I have been immortal for 3 centuries, Lord Deho. Do you know what that taught me? That immortality without purpose is just a very long death. Taeyang Park gave me purpose. He reminded me what it means to live rather than simply exist. If that makes me common, then I embrace it." The council had no response. They could rage and protest, but what was done could not be undone. Their queen had made her choice. In the weeks that followed, Valicia Prime rebuilt. The casualties had been terrible, but the victory had been total. The Macron horde sued for peace, their military shattered and their will to fight broken. They had learned what the rest of the galaxy was learning: never underestimate humanity, and never fight beings who have nothing left to lose. Princess Hana threw herself into preparing for eventual rule. She studied under her mother, learned from Taeyang, and grew into a leader who combined Valesian wisdom with human determination. She would be ready when her time came. Taeyang continued to lead Ghost Company, but the nature of his role changed. He was no longer just a soldier. He was the Queen's consort, the living symbol of the bond between Valicia and humanity. Other species watched and learned. If Valesians could accept humans as equals, as partners, then perhaps old prejudices needed to be reconsidered. One evening, 6 months after the battle, Taeyang and Yuri stood on the same balcony where they had first truly understood their connection. The city below glowed with life, rebuilt and stronger than before. Above them, the stars stretched into infinity. "Do you regret it?" Taeyang asked. "Giving up your immortality?" Yuri took his hand, their fingers intertwining. Through the bond, he felt her absolute certainty. "Not for a single moment. I had eternity ahead of me, but it was empty. Now I have perhaps 50 or 60 years with you, and they will be more valuable than all the centuries I lived alone." "Only 50 or 60 years? I plan to live much longer than that." She laughed, the sound like music. "Then I will live longer too. We rise together, remember? And fall together. Hopefully not for a very long time." They stood in comfortable silence. 2 beings from different worlds who had found each other across the vast emptiness of space. The bond between them pulsed with warmth and contentment. "The council has been pushing for a formal ceremony," Yuri said, "to officially recognize you as my consort. Do you want that?" "I want whatever makes you happy. You have given me so much, Taeyang. A second chance at life. A reminder of what it means to feel. A reason to look forward to tomorrow instead of just enduring it." He pulled her close, and she rested her head against his shoulder. "You saved my life twice. You gave me purpose when I thought I was just a soldier waiting to die. If a ceremony makes the council happy and strengthens the bond between our peoples, then I will wear whatever crown they want me to wear. It is not a crown. more like a very elaborate cloak. I already have one elaborate cloak. How many does one person need? She smiled against his shoulder. In Valesian politics, at least 7. They laughed together, and through the bond they shared the joy of simply being alive, being together, being free from the shadow of death that had haunted them both for so long. Princess Hana found them there an hour later. She had grown in the past months, becoming stronger and more confident. When she ruled, she would be a queen who understood both the wisdom of patience and the courage to act. The ambassador from Earth is here, Hana said. They want to discuss expanding the human presence in the coalition. Tell them I will meet with them tomorrow, Yuri replied. Tonight I am off.